I do think that children are the most oppressed group in society, and like there's almost like this legitimized coercion towards children. That's what I'm for, basically. I'm an advocate for taking children seriously and treating them as people um, in a non-paternalistic way.
Hello and welcome back to the Hannah Frankman podcast. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Arjun Khemani. Arjun is a 17-year-old high school dropout who lives in India and is currently helping to build an app with Naval Ravikant, who is both a Twitter and a Silicon Valley celebrity. He's the founder of multiple companies. He's invested in over 200, including some very well-known companies like Twitter and Uber. And in today's episode, Arjun and I talk about his experience growing up, going to school in India. We talk about how he started to leverage the internet to not just consume content created by his intellectual heroes, but to actually meet them and to get to have them on his podcast. And we talk about how he joined the community of people around a new app that Naval was building called Airchat, and how he ended up being an early user and then eventually meeting Naval and pitching Naval on joining his team, where he's been working for almost a year. And we talk about how most of the world doesn't take kids seriously enough and how kids are capable of much more than most adults give them credit for, especially now that they have access to the leverage and the power of the internet. And we talk about how his own thinking around this has shifted as he has been on this journey of taking a very unusual path to his own education and his own career launch, but also what parents can learn from young people like Arjun, who are taking very unconventional approaches to launching their careers, but who are being very successful at it and who beg the question, what is actually necessary in an education? And what is actually a good use of time, and what's maybe not as important as we thought it was. I really enjoyed this conversation with Arjun, and I hope that you enjoy listening. Arjun, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Hannah.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. I've been so stoked about this conversation. There are so many things I'm dying to ask you. How are you? What time is it for you?
I'm doing great. It's 7:45 a.m. here. Next day for me.
Yeah, it's 8:15 p.m. day prior for me. We had to do a little bit of schedule Jenga to make this work because I am in Austin, Texas, and you are in India.
Yeah.
Which is fun. You're the first person based in India that I've had on the podcast. So this is great. We're going international. Thank you so much for making time for this before you go work a full work day. Are you more of a morning person? Is doing stuff like this in the mornings easy for you, or are you more of a night owl? Like, is it because
Yes,
I'm a night owl, so like if I do early morning calls, I'm like, I could have said that so much better if I'd had like 4 more hours of awake time to get my brain prepped.
No, I'm definitely a morning person. I have a fixed sleep schedule that I try to follow rigidly, and I wake up at 4:45 a.m. every single day, no matter the day. And I wake up and usually, open email, Slack, and other things that I need to do. So just, go online as soon as I can and grab coffee, and then I go for a run or either to the gym. Or some days I have calls like this. So, yeah.
Are you a 4:45 wake up person because it feels optimal for your productivity, or are you a 4:45 wake up person because that's naturally when your body wants to get up?
I think it's a bit of both, because, when I just like it when it's dark outside, and I like to get the first morning sun, and just being alone in the dark and just, reading something sometimes, or checking in on work before I tackle the day. I think that like sort of just gives me a mental edge ahead of everybody else. So yeah, I think it's a bit of both.
I also like the quiet alone time at night, but I like it at the end of the day. I feel like my thinking is sharper. I've always been this way since I was a kid. And it's kind of
Yeah.
annoying because all of the productivity advice says to do what you do and get up at 4:45 and, read 3 books and do a cold plunge and run a marathon and then, sit down at your inbox 2 hours later. But I feel like for me, it just takes longer for the
Sure.
cognitive, not even the cognitive, like the creativity to kick in. Like
Mm.
being alone when it's dark and it's quiet at night and I've already had a full day of information download, my brain's like, all right, now we have ideas, let's go. Which I guess makes us perfectly synced for calls like this when it's morning for you and night for me.
Yes.
So there are a bunch of reasons why I'm really excited to have you here. One of them is the fact that you are 17 years old on a very unusual education trajectory. And you have in your Twitter bio that you're building a company with Naval, which is very cool. And I have a lot of questions about how you got there that I want to talk about. But I want to start with a backstory because your education journey is super interesting and fairly unconventional. I'm going to ask you the open-ended question first, and then we'll go into all of my specific questions. But I want to tee you up, just tell whatever version of this story you want to tell. You can give us the long form or the short form, whatever you're feeling. But what has the education of Arjun Khemani looked like? Tell us the lore.
Sure. So let's see. I think we could start at COVID because that's when I really started to think differently from what I was thinking before, and started to go I started to delve a lot into counterculture books, and that sort of really shaped my thinking and made me think differently from what I was thinking about before. So I used to go to a pretty conventional school. I would care about getting grades and whatever a normal teenager cares about, playing video games. And when COVID hit, so like I wasn't going to school and I wasn't exposed to that same environment where grades matter, obedience matters. You're supposed to do what you're told. But I took a step back and I really started to think about what I was doing, and I started questioning a lot of these assumptions. That's when I really got interested in entrepreneurship and the idea of creating a product and then selling it for profit and then making the whole world better as a product of doing that. And yeah, so I think during COVID, I really broke off some of the assumptions that I had. And, you know, after COVID and after I had to go back to school physically, I was like, oh, I just can't stand this. I was completely anti-authoritarian by then. So I was like, okay, we need to figure out what to do. And so by that time, I really started to blog, and then I was sharing my experience online and met a lot of interesting and cool people, some of whom were my intellectual heroes. And I got to work with them. I got to, create podcasts with them. And then I was in a pretty good position to actually quit school and then work on Airchat with Naval that he mentioned. So that's kind of the story. I know it's not really that clear, but I guess we could connect the dots as we move forward.
Oh no, we'll dig into all of the pieces of this. First of all, I want to know, you said that I had the words that you used on the tip of my tongue and now I'm losing them, but the intellectual books that you said, no, back in the beginning, during COVID, you started reading these I want to say intellectually dissident. I know that's not what you said.
Yeah.
But these you started to branch out into unusual intellectual avenues. How did that happen? And also, what do you mean by that?
Right. I think so when you're in school and you're surrounded by this environment of just mostly everybody agreeing on one thing, and that is that maybe grades matter, or you have to do this because someone in authority tells you to do it. But because I was kind of physically separated from that during COVID, I think that was one aspect. And then I would have these long conversations with a friend who was kind of in my apartment complex, and we would just meet and talk for 2 or 3 hours a day. And he really showed me like a very different perspective. So like the entrepreneurial side of things, and that you could, instead of, working at a 9 to 5 for the rest of your life, you could, create jobs and you could create employment and you could do these other things. So that, I think that was another aspect. But I did read like a few books that really shaped my thinking during that time. One was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, a few other self-help books, and The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch was later, but that was also seminal in my thinking. But yeah.
Well, can you delve into some of the other books that you read? I'm really curious because it sounds like you went through a fairly profound mindset shift. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this started before you started reading the books. So that's what made you curious in the book about the books. But it sounds like something formative happened when you started reading these books, and also you were outside of the system for a while because of COVID, where it sounds like there was a paradigm shift in how you were looking at not just school, but also what was possible in the world around you. And correct me if I'm misrepresenting how you would describe this experience.
No, I think that's pretty correct. So I was still doing online school, but obviously it wasn't the same. You could just switch off your camera and do other stuff.
Yeah, we're doing school. Nobody's actually paying
yeah,
attention.
It's crazy. So I started a blog, and then I had a challenge for myself to publish 100 pieces for the first 100 days of starting a blog. So one piece a day on my blog, and I actually did that. But most of the time, I was just I muted my online class, and then I was just writing for my blog. So that was what was happening when I was supposed to be in school. But I think a few other resources other than Rich Dad Poor Dad, and there were a few. So a couple of video creators were Patrick Bet David. Not sure if you've heard of him. And Gary Vaynerchuk. He really inspired me to start creating content and just share my perspective. Not even like create content, but like just document your journey, and whatever I'm learning, just share it with people online. So those were a couple of people. I don't really remember the books, and I'm not sure if I'll still agree with some of them that I read, but they were pretty formative for me at that time, and really started to change the way I started to look at the world. So yeah.
How are you finding book recommendations? Like, what was your entry into the rabbit hole? Were you following people on the internet that were recommending them, or did you read the books and then start following people on the internet? Because now you're super tapped into both like the broad networks on Twitter, but also like more niche networks inside of communities of people utilizing the internet to find each other who have weird niche interests but are scattered all over the world. But what was the like first step to start unlocking all the other information doors?
Yeah, it was harder finding book recommendations early on for me. Now it's like I have so many books on my list that I don't even know what to read. But before, like, so I would, just Google stuff like Elon Musk book recommendations, like, and there are stuff like this online, and people actually get a lot of clicks from these good titles. And I would just go out and read books that people recommended, like Patrick David, or my friend that I mentioned, he recommended Rich Dad Poor Dad, actually. So yeah, and then I think one book just leads to another, and then after reading a lot of books, like you want to start writing as well. It was natural for me, at least, to go to writing after reading a lot of books. I don't know how it is for others, but that's when I started a blog and wanted to share my perspective with the world.
I'm going to need you to tell me about writing 100 blog posts in 100 days. Because when I worked for Praxis, the startup apprenticeship program, we had everybody do a 30-day blogging challenge where like you pick a month and you write and publish something every day for 30 days. And that was challenging for people, like coming up with an idea and getting it to a place where you feel comfortable putting it on the internet and anyone who Googles your name can find it. That's hard. That's a big lift. 100 days is that's impressive. What was that like?
Yeah, I think I guess I really wanted to do it.
That helps.
Yeah, that helps. So and I mean, you could still find them on my website, but like they're pretty bad, right? And I think everyone starts like that. Like you sort of take a guess and put something out there, and then you criticize it. Either you discovered something new, or somebody else tells you that this thing. Somebody else brings up a misconception that was in your writing, or style or whatever. So like you keep on iterating, and then you keep on improving, I guess. Um, but after the end of 100 days, I was like, okay, now I need to focus more on quality than on quantity. So I was like, okay, let's do like 2 blog posts a week, and make sure they're high quality. And some of my blog posts were like 350 words, so that's not pretty long. But if you got to do that every day, then it is pretty long. So yeah, after that, I think it was a great experience. Like I'm glad I did it, and it kept me consistent. Um, and yeah, like I said, I think I really wanted to do it as well.
Yeah, that helps. If someone else tells you you should do something like
Yeah,
that and you're doing it because someone else either told you you're supposed to or just externally recommended it and you appreciate their advice, so you do it because someone you respect told you to do it, it's much harder to maintain the energy than if you're doing something like this because you intrinsically just really want to know what it feels like to put out 100 pieces of content in 100 days. That deep motivation is definitely important. I think it's a very hard thing to just sort of give out as advice and expect it to work for most people.
yeah.
Um, but if you're deeply motivated, that it can become super helpful. I'm actually like, what did you notice over the course of the 100 days? Like, did it make it easier to put out content as you went, or was it harder because you felt like the well was kind of maybe a little more shallow in terms of ideas than it was when you started? Like, did you get burnt out? Was it easier to create content quickly over time? Do you feel like your writing got better? Did it like make it less uncomfortable to just ship something? Like, what did you notice?
Yeah, I think it definitely got easier. I'd say I was just delving into so many ideas at that time and reading so much, and I was like, I had something to say every single day, even if it wasn't like completely new or different from what I said yesterday. But I think it definitely got easier. I was definitely less uncomfortable sharing stuff like day after day, and yeah, like I think after after a few days, it was just like, okay, this is something I do, and it's part of my routine. I guess with ChatGPT would have gotten like way easier now. So if I wanted to do it right now, it would just be like very very easy to do that. But yeah, I think it just got easier.
So, I want to talk a little bit about your education experience pre COVID before we get into all of the things that have happened since, because there's a ton to unpack there. But I want to set the stage first with what your background was prior to all of this. And most of the people, I have listeners all over the world, but the majority of listeners are based in the US. So they probably don't know a ton about what the education system is like in India. What was your education experience like pre COVID?
Sure. So um, I went to like a private school, but the public schools here are very low quality. So it's not like in the US that, most middle class parents send their kids to public school. It's like over here, most of the people are going to private schools, which are probably as good as the public schools in the US. Um, and it's interesting because I wasn't like in this mindset before COVID. So I didn't look at authority with disdain, and like I was just sort of going with the flow. But now, like, so a friend recently told me he's from London and he came to India, and he saw like a lot of schools here advertise like their children who score like top marks and stuff, and so they'll put a poster of them and say, this girl got 99% in this engineering exam, and he thought it was very unusual, but I've seen that a lot over here. So there's definitely a lot of pressure from um, parents and just societal pressure in general to get your kids a basic education and to uh, have them excel in academics. And I don't know if you're aware of like the IIT and all of that, but that's generally a lot of pressure among Indian parents. And I maybe um, generalizing, but from my experience, like a lot of parents here want their kids to be one of three things, like either an engineer, doctor, or lawyer, and go into those fields and to make money. But later on, I sort of discovered that the people who make the most amount of money are people who are entrepreneurs and who are selling products and who have companies. They're not doctors, engineers, or lawyers. Um, so that was also like kind of a wake up point for me that maybe this isn't the best way to make money and to be successful. And there's just so many definitions of success. But I think just the Indian culture is sort of narrowly focused on like these safe paths. Like I know I understand the desire for parents for the kids to be safe and to have a secure lifestyle, but I think that just obstructs a lot of good things coming from the child, like their creativity and their goals and the stuff that could lead to, right? Like that could be world changing. But if you're just sending them, creating a path for them that everybody is on, like that's just not going to help that much. Maybe they're going to have a safe job, secure, and like they're going to have some money, but I don't know. Are they going to be happy? Like, is that something they want? So
I think what you're describing is a much more maybe starkly defined version of a relatively similar phenomenon here, where there are a lot more paths, I think, that are considered to be safe or reasonable, but there's still such a strong default towards what appears to be safe. There are lots of different things that you can go to school and study, but the safe path is you do well in high school, you get into a good college, you study something that's going to have a career track that you can step onto once you get out of university, and you step into a career that's going to give you, health insurance and a retirement savings account and maybe a pension and all of these benefits that sort of guarantee a level of life security. But those things come at the cost of, one, your maybe creative endeavors, but two, your time. If you're spending all of your time focused on building the safety net, then you don't have any time to do anything else, which is a gross simplification of a very broad and complicated phenomenon. But I think what you're describing is very relatable, just to maybe a less drastic extent.
mm-hmm.
But it's interesting to hear you talk about this. What was your experience like in school? Like, did you like school? Did you hate school? Did you think for a long time that you were on one of these paths to be a doctor or a lawyer? What was school like for you?
Yeah. So I mean, like, if you ask most kids today, like, why do you go to school? Or why do you want to go to school? You'll hear interesting answers, right? Like, I don't know, like, what's child gonna say? Because my parents want me to, because I like to go to school, or a lot of kids just jump at the joy of there being a holiday because it's snowing outside or raining too heavily outside, right? And so, if you would have asked me, like, do you want to go to school someday? Like before like my mindset totally shifted, I would be like, no, I'd rather be at home, do cool stuff, go on YouTube, play Fortnite, and do these other things. And I guess that's the same with a lot of kids today. But obviously some of them like to go to school and meet their friends, but that can definitely happen. If you don't go to school as well, you can meet your friends. And I want to talk to you about socialization and homeschooling. I know that's a topic that many parents are concerned about. Maybe you could get to that later. Um, but wait, now I'm forgetting. Okay, so my experience. So before,
Yeah.
like, it, I don't know. I was just kind of going with the flow. Like, I was I was there because there didn't seem like any other option than to be there. But I wouldn't have phrased it that way back then. But after, like, I sort of discovered all this, I was just like, this is not the place for me. I was having a lot of trouble at school. Um, one one quick funny story, like back after COVID, I had to write this psychology assignment, and I just didn't agree with the way the research was being done, and I thought that it had a lot of epistemological issues that weren't really addressed by my teachers, and like it was just like, oh, you have to like write like 10 pages, and most of it was just copying from the textbook, and that was like your psychology project, and you were graded for it. So what I did instead was write like a big uh, editorial on, literally the title was why I'm not doing this project. And I submitted that, and obviously that, I mean, so I was taken to the principal by the teacher, and like we discussed this. It was mostly friendly, but she said that you have great critical thinking skills, but you have to do this anyway. So so yeah, I had a lot of stories like that, but like it wasn't like I was doing a lot of mischievous things as such. Like it wasn't getting into bad stuff per se, but like disobedience to them was obviously not right, and it was like something that had to be punished, uh, which was also like one of the reasons I just hated school afterwards, and was so keen on quitting.
When they said that you had to do the assignment anyway, they're basically telling you, you made a great argument, but sorry, you still have to do this. Did they have a good reason for why? Like, were they able to argue why the assignment was important? Or was it just a very authoritarian, sorry,
Yes.
these are the rules?
Um, yeah, so I think it was the latter. Like they basically said that we can't customize a project for like 40 kids in a class, or it was like so many 200 kids in a whole grade, in a whole standard. So that was kind of the argument. Like they were like, basically like you can't be creative here, and like you have to uh, follow the guidelines, and everybody has to do it because you're graded, and like if you're not, then you're gonna have trouble with the board, and then you won't get marks for this, and blah blah blah. So
That kind of thing bothers me so much because in my mind, it's so obvious that if you're able to make a solid argument for why you shouldn't have to do something, or you're able to demonstrate a level of creative thinking that somehow finagles your way out of having to do the thing and into some alternate proposal for reality, in my mind, that trumps the value of pretty much any assignment anyone could give you many times over. Like, obviously, there are unique and individual circumstances where, there is value in an assignment that's important. Someone's giving you something for a reason. If you're in some kind of like higher level intensive and the assignments are more formal, like maybe then like you're there for a reason and the assignments are there for a reason, maybe it makes more sense. But a normal school assignment, in my head, what you did is infinitely more valuable than any school assignment I can imagine. And I find it so frustrating when people don't acknowledge the creative thinking that's behind that, because very rarely does life give you an assignment and say, here, do this in exactly this way. And you'll, get an A, maybe like doing your taxes or filling out paperwork. But besides that, life is all about creative problem solving. So that's an infinitely more valuable skill. So I love that you did that. And even hearing you say that somebody's like, sorry, like it is cool, but we can't help you is very
yeah,
frustrating.
and keep in mind, like so firstly, I identify as a fallibilist, and like I think we're all fallible people. And I explicitly said that I may be wrong with this whole thing. And I had a lot of fun writing it, way more fun than just copying something written in the textbook. So that was one of the reasons I did it, because it was just fun. And I explicitly said that, I may be wrong. So feel free to criticize this thing and tell me why I'm wrong. But they didn't really focus on my arguments. They just said, "Oh, you have good critical thinking skills, but like you still have to do it." So it's funny that they didn't really focus on the content and the ideas. But yeah. Anyway, I'm glad that's all in the past, and now I'm ahead of that.
You're free.
Yeah.
Um, but you said that you would rather, or like when you were in school, you'd rather watch YouTube and play Fortnite than be in school, which is very understandable. Like that's the position of most kids. How did you go from that to being motivated to write a blog post every day for 100 days and read all of these books? Like what happened that made that more interesting to you than the quick dopamine hit of playing Fortnite?
Yeah. I think I never really knew that I could do all that. So there wasn't really an option for me. Or like I didn't know about that option. Um, and so like after a while, just Fortnite, it got boring for me, and so I was like, I want to move on to these better things that I can actually do. Um, and I think like um, yeah, it wasn't like somebody had to force that upon me. It was just like totally um, something that I wanted to do, and like I just found out that there's all these things and all these amazing people that I can connect to on the internet, and so I just started doing that and started talking to people and started writing. Um, but I don't think it had anything more to do than just that option opening up somehow.
What was the moment for you? I don't, maybe it wasn't a distinctive moment, maybe it was a progression. But what was the moment when you realized that the internet goes both ways? It's not just a thing that's, downloading into you. It's a thing that you can also upload
Yeah.
into. You can contribute to conversations instead of just listening to them. People who are posting on the internet, your heroes, your intellectual idols, these are people that you can reach out to and have a conversation with. You can meet them, you can work with them, you can have them on your podcast. When did that click, that this was a thing that you could interface with in two directions, not just as a
Yes.
consumer?
Um, so I don't think it was a moment. Like I said, I was watching Gary Vee videos, and he's a big guy on like I think he creates content and creating content. So he's talking about how to create content, and like if you want to do something, you can just, there's so many possibilities on the internet. So I was watching a lot of his videos, so that was definitely one of them. Um, and I think there's this misconception. So when I was starting to meet people online, um, like I was remembering being told that the internet and the world in general is a very dark place, and that you know you got to be careful, especially about people you meet on the internet. But now most of my friends are halfway across the world, and all thanks to the internet. And like they're like I've met some of them physically. I'm going to the U.S. next week and going to meet a lot of people there that I know of through Twitter and through other places. And that would never have been possible had I been discouraged. If someone told me, if someone told me like an experience of, they once talked to this person on the internet, and he was very fishy, and like he tried to fraud them or whatever. But like the world in general is a great place, and there are great people uh, online and in the real world as well. And so it's definitely not dangerous. And so like I think we really need to get rid of that notion. And a lot of people are told that. I was told that to some extent, that you need to be careful about whom you're meeting and stuff. And yes, I do. But there's just an amazing place over there. And so back to your question about creating, I was more interested in creating after like I sort of found my tribe, and found all these people that I had to talk to. And one of them was like just a Discord community. And I saw like one person talk about his unconventional education journey, and he took a gap year after high school, and he just traveled the world, and I thought that was pretty cool. So we got on a Zoom call, and like I then I got on a lot of these Zoom calls with people, and then I decided to start like a Discord server, and I titled it "The Unconventional Kind," and we would have like weekly calls, and it was just so much fun hearing about all these people from um, different places, and just all thinking differently from what I had in my physical environment. So it was kind of like a good way to escape from the real world for me, from the quote unquote real world. Um, but but yeah, that's kind of the story. And I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but yeah.
No, you did. Um, what was the moment? Like, who was the first one of your intellectual heroes that you got to meet on the internet, and how did that happen?
Sure. So I think the first one was Brett Hall. He uh, he he has this podcast where he basically um, just makes David Deutsch's content very, very accessible. And David Deutsch is another one of my intellectual heroes whom I got to meet and have on my podcast. But Brett Hall was the first, and he's he's one of the reasons that I also got to work with Nawal. So he's kind of like a big matchmaker for me. But he I was listening to his podcast like obsessively. I was just like going through the book, The Beginning of Infinity, and listening to his chapter by chapter commentaries. And I reached out to him once on Twitter, and then we got talking in a conversation. And he was impressed that I was into these ideas at a very young age. And he was one of the first people I had on my podcast, and I got to talk with him before that. But it was just the magic of Twitter that we both got connected, and now are pretty good friends.
Today's episode is brought to you by the John Galt Mortgage Company. I am not currently in the market for a house, but when I am, I will absolutely be working with the John Galt Mortgage Company, which was founded by my friends Mitch and Tim earlier this year. Mitch and Tim have been working in the real estate world for years, and they learned that mortgages are way more expensive than they need to be. Most real estate agents don't even know how much extra profit is baked into the cost. So Mitch and Tim decided to build a new kind of mortgage, one where they voluntarily cap their own profit on every transaction and pass the savings along to you, the buyer, in the form of a lower interest rate. When I am on the market for a house, I will absolutely be working with Mitch and Tim. And if you are in the market, you should absolutely check out what they're doing and get a quote for interest rates that they can offer you. You can connect with them at johngaltmortgage.com, or you can find the link down in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. So we have to talk about the Naval thing, how this happened, because this is also such a cool story. How did you come to be? And I already know part of the answer to this question, but we have to go over like the backstory version of this first for the sake of the recording, and then we'll get into some, like, more specifics about this. But you have to tell the story of how you came to be helping to build a company with Naval at 17 years old. This is such a great story.
Sure. So let's see. Back when Airchat was in beta and nobody on the internet knew about it, there was just like 500 people on the app. I was introduced to it by Brett, whom I mentioned just now, and he brought me onto the app. And Noel had already known me because of Brett, because Brett had told me about it, and Noel had already read my stuff by then. So Noel and I got in a private chat basically after I started posting on the beta air chat, and we started talking. And then he said something around the lines of, we're not really looking for, I forget the role that he mentioned, but we're not looking for that role. And that, but if we were, like, you'd be like one of the first people to know about it, and I'd love to work together potentially. So I was like, this seems like an amazing opportunity. And so I just proposed something the next day, and like just try to be as helpful as possible, and like just frame it in a way that would be helpful. And obviously that's my role right now as well. But I gave him a proposal, and he basically agreed. And he talked with his co-founder, and we just started like 10 days after. So yeah.
I think it's really interesting that once you start to make even just a couple connections in areas that you find interesting, you start to realize very quickly that most interesting people know each other. And if they don't know each other, they know somebody who knows someone, like no one is very many degrees of connection apart. And it looks very distant
Mhm.
when you're just a consumer, when you haven't stepped into the shoes of a creator. It feels like, there are all of these heroic people who are on pedestals and they have their tens and thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of followers. And they feel like they're on another planet. Like they cohabitate with us on this earth, but like maybe you'll get to see one once in the wild and it'll be so exciting, and maybe you can get a picture with them or like see them live somewhere. But it feels like there's just this separation and you can't even quite put your finger on what it is, but there's just this sense of distance. And then you start talking to people who are doing interesting things. Like you start to put yourself in the game a little bit. You start putting things out on the internet about what you're thinking about, what you're working on. And then other people find those things interesting. And when you reach out to them, they can go back and look and say, okay, this person has some credibility. Like they're actually thinking about things. They're interesting. They have some substance. And you have a conversation and you start to realize that this person knows somebody else who's really cool. And then their friends know some cool people. And all of a sudden you're not very many degrees removed, if at all, from the people that you had on the pedestal in the first place. And you have to go back and rethink all your premises. You're like, wait a second, these people are also human. And they're also like texting people and getting on Zoom calls and they're in chat groups. And I just didn't know where they were, but they're all here. And they're not on some separate plane of existence. And I can also be in these chat rooms and in these Twitter threads and having these conversations. And it starts to just break down all your perceived paradigms around what isn't possible and like where you are and aren't allowed to play. And I put that in air quotes because I think a lot of people feel like they aren't qualified to be playing certain types of games or to be in certain types of conversations. But it's sort of this like self-imposed restriction almost. Like you're not going to go write something on Twitter and have Elon Musk reply like your first tweet, probably. But if you get on Twitter and you start building connections, it's also not a pipe dream to think that someday you might have a Twitter conversation with Elon Musk. Like these things happen all the time. And I find it very interesting to hear people's stories of how those barriers start to break down. And it sounds like for you, it happened pretty organically and pretty quickly.
Yes. And I think the whole story that he gave was basically just my experience. Thinking of these people as like on a pedestal and some people that I could probably never reach or reach like after a long, long time of hard work. But then like just so many things happening serendipitously and things that I could never have really planned for. One connection leading to the other. And yeah, like now they're not on a pedestal, right? Like they're, I'm still a big fan, but like, and they're still my intellectual heroes, but like now we're talking and we're in conversations and, yeah, I'm working with them. So, it all just happened very quickly for me, but also like when I was doing it, like when I was writing the 100 blog posts, say, like, and nobody was reading them, right? Like I had these 100 blog posts and nobody was reading them. So I had literally no external motivation whatsoever. But I still kept writing them. So during that time, it felt like a long time, like nobody's reading these things and I'm not really getting noticed. But after like it hit sort of a tipping point, then, like things just move very, very fast.
You also have a secret advantage that I think people don't talk about nearly enough, which is the fact that you are young. And I don't think people appreciate how much adults who have been successful are willing to go out of their way for a young person who is hungry and curious, but also has demonstrated that they're willing to put in the work and show up at a certain level. Like you're not just full of questions and not doing anything. You've been showing up and publishing your ideas day after day, which is hard to do. And now you're helping to build a company and you're running a podcast and you're publishing with different publications, like you're doing all of these different things that signal a level of seriousness and commitment that goes a really long way in making people, like, if you've already, it's sort of like the adage, when you move, the world moves to meet you. Like once you start moving and you're young, people are exceptionally excited to help you. And I think this is a superpower that a lot of people sleep on. Like they
Yeah.
think they have to go and get all these credentials, and by the time they've gotten all the credentials and the university system spit them out with their freshly minted piece of paper saying that they're, you are a degreed individual, you are, certified in this specific area of study. You're not a young person anymore. I mean, you still kind of are. Like if you're under 25 or even under 30, you're probably playing games that a lot of people your age aren't playing, and you're going to stand out from the crowd. But you've already lost some of the most formative years of being able to say, hey, I'm like 19 years old and I'm doing this thing. And most people doing this thing are 35. That inherently makes me stand out. It makes me interesting. Most people squander that, I think, because they want to get the safe stuff out of the way first. But by the time you've gotten the safe stuff out of the way, you've already burnt a lot of years that are, it's not the only time that you have to have people help you, but it's a uniquely positioned time to reap some benefits that are maybe harder to grasp later in life.
Yes, I think that's correct. And I think I do have an advantage in that respect that you mentioned. And like people often ask me, how do you, reach out to all these people and talk to them? And I just sort of open with that I'm 17 years old right now and I'm doing all this. And I've had this person on my podcast before. Would you like to join me in a conversation, in a recorded conversation as well? And like, sure, some people say no, or I think the people who say no is like very, very low, at least in my experience. For me, a lot of people ignore, or maybe they don't see the message. And some people say yes, and they're very happy to come on my podcast. And I even get like comments from them that they, like when I was your age, like I wasn't doing stuff like this, or I think it's great that you're doing it at such a young age. So I think that's definitely a good factor. And like just framing your requests in a way that makes it easy for the other person to help. I think that's like also like it just makes them easy for them to say yes. And how much does it take to do like a 1 hour Zoom meeting? Maybe it is a lot for some people, but like for most people, like they'll agree if you frame it in a nice way, and like you have all this backstory that you've shared in your cold email or DM.
I also find it really interesting that you had this very clear divergence from the status quo path. You were on the normal trajectory with everybody else for a long time. And then there's this stark divide where all of a sudden you start going in a separate direction. You veer off. When did you leave school permanently? Was it when you landed the full-time job with Airchat?
Yes. So right out, I think less than a month or a month after that. So that was in March last year. So it's going to be a year now.
And how much school did you have left at that point?
I had just 1 year left. So I had to finish the 12th standard, the 12th grade, and I completed my 11th. I just completed my 11th grade.
Okay. Did you get pushback from your family, from your community? Was it a tough sell to leave? What were the mechanics of this like?
Yeah, it was definitely very tough. My parents weren't on board with the idea, so it was a lot of convincing to do with them. But I think we kind of settled on a middle ground where I would be giving like these private candidate exams. So it was like, are you aware of Cambridge or A levels? The Cambridge A
Mhm.
level board. So
Yeah.
I basically told them, what if I don't go to school and still get this high school certification from Cambridge A levels, but as a private candidate? So that means I don't
Can
have
you
to go.
explain really quickly for people who aren't familiar what that is?
Yeah. So it's basically like if you do these A-level things with a as a private candidate, you don't have to go to school. You can self-study or get a tutor or whatever, and you can just go and sit the exams at the end of the year or whenever they are, and then get your A-level certification that most universities will accept. So I don't plan to go to university, but my parents really wanted me to have a backup, and so
Mhm.
they agreed on this middle option after a lot of convincing. uh, and but yeah, they saw that I was doing these things and I was working with Naval, and a paycheck helped. So yeah, I think that made them sort of support my choice. And then I ended up like quit school um, after finishing 11th grade. But it took a while. Like I didn't want to go to school for a while. Like almost the entire year of 11th grade, I was like, this is not something I want to do. I really need to find another option. But I still completed the whole year. And then I was like, no way I'm doing a whole another year. So
Can we talk a little bit about convincing your parents to let you drop out of school? Because I think this is something, there are two reasons why I'm interested in this. One, it's something that, like, I know a number of parents who have been on the other side of this conversation where their kid wants to drop out of school and they're grappling with, oh man, like, I don't know, this doesn't feel like, the path well traveled or guaranteed for any type of success. Like, everything I know says that you need to have at least your high school diploma, if nothing else, to be successful in life. And I've also been on, I have a number of friends who've been on the other side of the conversation. They've been young people who've been trying to convince their parents to let them drop out of school and either homeschool themselves or unschool themselves or just quit altogether and go do something else. But I also think that there are a lot of young people who would like to do what you did and probably would like your advice on, like, okay, you got to tell us what worked here so that we can replicate it. What what was your pitch? And what ended up being the things that actually tipped your parents over the edge?
yeah, so I think, as you know, I'm not really in a position to give advice. I don't think anybody is. Um, and the, there's just like very complicated, different problem situations that every individual is going through, and like I don't want to tell them anything uh, to do that. But I can talk about my experience, of course. It wasn't like one pitch or one conversation that either convinced them or didn't convince them. It was like ongoing discussions almost every single day. Um, me being like just very very sad that I have to go to school every single day, and always bringing that up to my parents and talking about this alternative, right? And like people always tell you that, oh, you just hear about this one success story, but you don't hear about the 99 failures that happened. And yeah, there are many failures, but you don't hear about you know like those successes that aren't really traditionally recognized as much. So there are many successes at a smaller level, or maybe like the something a kid really wanted to do and then he went ahead and did it. Or even if he didn't do it, like he tried and then he failed. And I think like to some extent, like people take this very seriously. That like if you don't get educated at this point in time and you fail, then like your life's gonna get ruined. But that's just not the case. Um, and But yeah, like it was a lot of arguing back and forth and very aggressive discussions, definitely. But at the end of it, like I'm happy I took this middle option, and it all worked out.
I also want to talk about the fact that most adults don't take kids seriously enough, or like they don't give enough credence to kids' capabilities to accomplish things. Like, most adults would be intimidated by the prospect of trying to land a job with Naval. Like, if you told the average adult, go pitch your way into a role at Naval's new company, they would stumble over the idea of how to do that. It's intimidating. It's scary. It's like, okay, there's this person who is wildly successful and surely is a good judge of talent and doesn't have any time to waste on people who aren't, useful, and you have this one shot to impress them and land a job. That's an intimidating prospect for a lot of people. And yet you did it sounds like in part kind of by accident. Like you weren't, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't sound like you were even getting involved with Airchat at first because you wanted to work there necessarily. Like you thought it was cool.
No, I
And
did.
then an opportunity started to present itself. Or did you have designs to work there from the beginning?
No. So Nawal sort of brought up an idea to work together potentially, and then I took that one shot. But I was totally in love with the product, and I thought that this is really something that is cool and that I want to be a part of. So yeah, it was kind of a bit of both. That I was like thinking about, like it would be just totally amazing to be working on this.
But you also, like, you're running a podcast where you've interviewed people like David Deutsch, which is like, that's a big deal to land a guest like that. And you've had a number of really cool and successful people come on your show. And I think it's really easy for adults to just not give a lot of credit to kids and what they're capable of. And I'd love to hear you talk about that, maybe on more of, I mean, because you can talk about it from the experiential side of like, you've been in that position and you've persevered and overcome in spite of, but maybe on a more philosophical level too, of like the broader phenomenon of adults not taking kids seriously enough, because it's very prevalent and most kids are capable of a lot more than the average adult gives them credit for.
Yeah, yeah, I do think that children are the most oppressed group in society, and like there's almost like this legitimized coercion towards children. Obviously, that is with people as well, like normal people, and the government does that. But we could get to that later. With children, so I like to bring up the example of women and then Africans before, and like how they weren't given equal rights before, and that changed, and society evolved, and we made moral progress. And I do think that such a thing can happen with children as well if we want it to. And that's what I'm for. Basically, I'm an advocate for taking children seriously and treating them as people, and in a non-paternalistic way. And like they, children are people. They have interests, and they are naturally curious. They want to learn things, but people just have this assumption that authority has to mold children in a certain way, or they'll turn out to be whatever, like a disaster or something. But that's just not the case. Like, sure, they can be a part of your culture, and most of the children are, but like they're just sort of instilled a lot of these, just like So let me back up. So children are often punished to if they fail an exam, or if they make a mistake. But I think mistakes are how you learn in the first place. And like we're instilling all these hangups in children that later on could be very dangerous for them, even though we think that it's for their safety, right? And then obviously these same children grow up, and they forget their experience, or maybe they don't forget their experience, but they think that they also have to mold their children in the same way that their parents did, and so the cycle just keeps on continuing. And yeah, like I think the reason like a lot of people don't like to read books is also because like they're forced to read books during school, and so like they're forced to read books that they may not even like, or that they're not interested in. And I think like if you read books that you're interested in, then you'll just generally be more of a reader than if you're forced to do that. And so like people have these assumptions about books being like boring or something. But like at the heart of it, like I think we should treat children as people, and let them follow their interests. And obviously, there's a whole lot of implications from that philosophy that we can get into. But yeah, I'd say that's sort of my stance.
I love this stance, and I'm going to poke at it for a second. I'm going to play devil's advocate, not because I disagree with you, but for the sake of conversation. When you say that children are the most oppressed group in society, this is the kind of spicy take I live for. And also, I think that's a tough pill for people to swallow, because there are a lot of protections that society has in place to defend kids, and to keep them safe from some of the harshnesses of reality that they might not yet be equipped to navigate. And to an extent, that is appropriate and even developmentally necessary. Like, there are some things that kids are not yet ready for. And so I think that that's a very strong pill for people to swallow, the idea that children are oppressed. It's like, no, they're protected. We're keeping them safe. We're not trying to like shove them down because they're competing against us in the workforce, and we're not trying to shove them down because we think that they're going to like degrade society somehow by being in it. We're protecting them from the harshnesses of reality before they are fully developed and are able to bear the weight of it. What do you say to people who come back with that sort of argument against that take?
Sure. So, like, I don't know, how are you protecting children by not, letting them do what they want to do? And like, I'm not saying like just completely letting go. In taking children seriously is not about just it's not like non-interactive. It's very much an interactive
Right.
process, and but like facilitating their growth, right, and not just shutting them down. How is it that you are protecting your kids by just telling them to obey or to not do these certain things just because a certain authority says so? And so yeah, like that would basically be my question.
Does the degree to which this apply differ based on like the age bracket of a child? Like, I would assume this is much more pertinent to like a teenager than maybe an 8-year-old. How do you think about, like, even both looking back at your own journey, but also on a more broad and philosophical level, how do you think about what is like the right level of autonomy to give kids at different point in times? Like, is this a universal hypothesis or philosophy, or is it contingent on like where a child is at in their developmental process?
Sure, I don't think it's age related at all. And you mentioned, it's not that we're like letting kids stay off the workforce because they're competing with us, but I don't know, like some trade unions' incentives, like I'm not talking about parents here, but like some trade unions actually might be incentivized to keep them off the workforce because
I knew when that came out of my mouth that it's more complicated than that simple blanket statement.
Exactly. But yeah, I don't think it's age related. Like if a kid wants, if they're like 13 or 16 or whatever their age is, right? If they want to be employed, if they want to work with someone and an employer is willing to pay them whatever, something that the child agrees upon, then I don't think anybody should intervene in that contract. And I think like that's not oppression if both sides are agreeing to a written contract. So I don't think we really need to save. So one side of this was like, like before the industrial revolution, like people were farming, or like during the industrial revolution, there was these factory workers. So it was saving kids from those things. And I think even that isn't quite, isn't really a good argument if both sides agree. But right now, like we live in a digital age, and like people are information is so democratized, and like ideas are the new oil. So like people, the physical component is just not there. And so like if a child wants to work and an employer is willing to hire them, then I think that should just be allowed, and kids should be allowed to work. With regards to 8-year-olds, and like obviously children need some facilitating, and it's going to be like hard to sort of navigate. And I don't have all the answers, right? Like people, I just think that coercion is is not the way, is not the optimal way to solve things. And so we need to work towards a way that aims to eliminate that aspect towards all societal groups. Um, and so wherever there's coercion, like I think there's an imperfection to solve, and something that we could solve. And so, I'm not saying that we should let like every child vote tomorrow, like like vote for the president tomorrow. uh, I think that's not the way to do things. Like we need to solve these problems incrementally, but understand that there is a problem, and like these children are not taken seriously, and another word, they're oppressed. But like, so yeah, we should try and work towards solving those problems.
Have you ever read Venkatesh Rao's essay series Breaking Smart?
I haven't actually. No.
Oh, you would love it. You have to read this. It's an essay series. He calls it a season. So it's like season 1 of his thoughts on the ideas of it's built around the Mark Andreessen quote, software is eating the world. And it's just like this deep philosophical dive into how does software relate to other, what he calls soft technologies that have permeated human civilization throughout history, things like written language and currency, like things that have gone to infiltrate every other aspect of reality. And he talks about how, he just goes deep into what software is and the implications of it, and how we've, barely even begun to see the implications of it because it's such a new technology. But he makes a great point in one of the first couple essays in the series. I've read this multiple times and I still can't remember exactly where this is. I want to say it's in essay 1. It's like right at the beginning. He's talking about how the credential game has changed very dramatically with the inception of software, because you can have a teenager who knows how to write code, who can build something that affects or is used by basically an infinite number of people. Like you can write a piece of software that is infinitely replicable, yes, that can end up inside of the workflow or the even like the daily habits of basically an infinite number of people. And just like the disproportionality of that, of how there's like this weird, almost economic undercurrent to software where kids have a level of power that they maybe didn't before because they have to go through fewer gatekeepers to create something of enormous consequence. And I find that very interesting. And I feel like it relates to a lot of what you're talking about. But I think there's also this sort of interesting parallel. And I want to go back to the story that you were telling early on in our conversation about the fact that you started out using the internet to watch YouTube, I assume very recreationally and probably a lot less constructively than you're using it now. And you went on to use the internet to connect with people like David Deutsch and Naval, and to host a podcast and to make Twitter friends who could help you, network in places that would help you land career opportunities, that would help you go on to do, whatever it is that you choose to do next. Why do most people use the internet so badly? Because what you're doing is not, there is equal opportunity. There's equal access. Anyone could do what you're doing, but most people don't. There's not even remotely equal usage of said opportunity. Why are most people so bad at it? Do you have a hypothesis about this?
So I think there are, I think it boils down to like some cultural reasons. probably that, this is the way to get a secure job, and then a secure job. And obviously the internet is pretty new, right? We think it's been here for a while, and it has, but like, it's also not. It's also a very recent invention. And people often talk about like the good old days, which never really happened. and uh, and they forget that children not working is a recent invention as well. Like back before industrialization, like kids had no other choice but to work with their families in the farm, or bring water from like 2 miles, um, wherever. And like, life wasn't good before industrialization, and a lot of people just forget that, and they think that it's just all rosy, and like, they were all in an unpolluted nature. But like, that just wasn't the case. You need to have technology to actually enjoy nature, and you need to move past your basic needs to actually do that. But um, why do most people don't use the internet correctly? I don't know. Like, eh, maybe they don't see these options, or they don't know that they can do these other things with the internet. Haven't really explored that very much. I just kind of followed my own interests, and like the internet was a great place to really do things exponentially than regular things in the physical world. But I don't know. Do you have an hypothesis on this, or? Um,
I have a few. I don't have a comprehensive one yet. I wish I did, because I see this as being one of the fundamental problems of a lot of the education questions that I find very interesting. Is like, we have this huge proliferation of information. We have better access to information than any point in recorded history. Like, I can access more things right this minute than most well-educated and highly intellectually influential people throughout history had access to in their entire lifetimes. And yet most people touch none of it. Like, it's weird that the amount of information that we have access to exploded, and the amount of engagement with information stayed pretty much exactly the same. And that's an interesting psychological question. It's an interesting like social question. There's a lot to unpack there. We could probably do 3 podcast episodes just about that question and still not get to the bottom of it. But I find it I have a few thoughts about this. I think there's a motivation problem where the internet has also led to a proliferation of all of the things that prey on our weaknesses and our desire for dopamine hits, and the satisfaction of like little micro wins that really have nothing to do with anything, make us feel like we're being productive or accomplishing something, or being social or validated or whatever. And so it's like you have access to anything on the planet, but you have to sail past the sirens first. And most people never make it past the siren song. They just, jump off the ship and go drown themselves they drown their own motivation and will, trying to find these like little hits of satisfaction. I think there's also, like, I don't think what's obvious to you about the internet is necessarily obvious to most people. Like, it's obvious to you that you can go create content and meet people and land opportunities, and most people never engage with it that way. And if you don't engage with it that way, if you don't have that lived experience of, oh, this can be directly impactful to my day-to-day life, it can change everything about my day-to-day life, and that's not inherently exciting to you, then why would you expend the effort? Like, I think people just like never get that far in the first place because they don't realize it's possible. They think in this very segmented, there's like the successful people and then there's everybody else, and it's like 2 separate categories, and that's, confusing. I think it's a weird combination of like a distraction problem plus a lack of creative thinking around what's possible problem, plus a intrinsic motivation or lack thereof problem. But I also think that there are pieces of this that I'm still missing, because and I mean, maybe that's the answer, but I still think that's too simplistic. I think there's something else. But it also feels like an important thing to solve for,
Right.
because like, think of what could be with everything that we have access to, and that's a nice idea, you know? It would be really cool if everybody was on Project Gutenberg reading old books and in discussion forums debating the intricacies of economics and moral philosophy and, you know, how to build better businesses. I don't know. There's a lot there. There's a lot there to unpack, but I think it is one of the fundamental questions to ask, because if we can get that right, then we have like the Library of Alexandria on steroids at our fingers at any moment. And that's just crazy power to unleash.
Have you read Deschooling Society by Ivan Illich?
Yes.
So he talks about like these networks, right, that you can create, and then if a child wants to learn X subject, like let them have the resources necessary to learn that subject. Maybe some of it is online. Like, he didn't put it online in online terms, but like you would have thought that with the internet and like the internet revolution, like these changes should really happen very fast, but they're not happening, right? Or maybe they are. Like a lot of these education startups are popping up that I think are very cool and they're solving a real problem. But um, like I think he had a pretty cool vision that if applied successfully could um, you could solve that taking insurance seriously problem to some extent as well, where kids are allowed to follow their interests and go into subjects or ideas that they're interested in. But yeah, I think his ideas are fascinating, but it's just curious that they aren't really taking place with the internet and all the things that we talked about right now.
I know that you said that giving advice is not something that you feel qualified to do, but I'm going to put you on the spot anyway for a second, and you can take this in whatever direction that you want to. But there are a lot of parents who listen to this show. There are a lot of young people who listen to this show. For the young people who may they may resonate with some of what you're saying. They may also feel frustrated, trapped inside the status quo education system. They may feel like you're talking about the opportunities that you've unlocked and the connections that you've made, and they feel the stirring hunger of, I want this too. I want to figure out how to get there. And also for the parents who maybe want to unleash more of this in their kids. They want to encourage this. Maybe it feels a little frightening to step off the status quo path, but at the same time, they want to support their kids in, building something of their own, even if it's, they want their kids to be able to work at the startup at a young age, to start the podcast, to meet their heroes. What might you tell those both teenagers and also those parents based on the experience that you've had? If you could give them a recommendation, or maybe just share something from your own experience, some perspective on what this has been like for you, what would you tell them?
Okay. So, like I said, there's like, I don't really understand the problem situations of all these people, and they, someone might want to be a sports person, and like, they're being discouraged to do that, and like, and there's just so many different possibilities that these people and problem situations that these people might be going through. So it's really hard to pin down on something, but like, I'd just say to, question things, and I don't even know, like, to speak up, like again, because of different situations, I know how that could go wrong for them, and just giving advice in general, I don't think is a good relationship to have with somebody. Um, but but questioning things, trying to follow your interest to whatever extent possible, understanding that, like, if you're if you're being coerced against, then that is a problem that needs to be solved. And maybe you're not interested in solving that problem, and that's fine as well. But looking at whatever whatever is something that doesn't seem right to you, and going ahead and trying to fix that. And that could be a very simple thing as well, like whatever small thing that you're interested in, and just trying to follow the fun. And it's very like, I know this kind of advice, like doing what you like or following the fun, is not that helpful probably, because it's just so general. But that's sort of the best I can do.
I think it's important, though. I actually think it's really good advice, because I think it's something that a lot of people miss. I think they get very lost in the mechanics of, oh, if you want to be successful doing, building an internet brand, you need to be on Twitter every day, and you need to, make sure that you meet like 6 new people a month. And you need to, like, they have a lot of metrics-based advice, which is also helpful because it's giving you direction and specifics.
Which, by the way, may not even be what they did. Like, a lot of people sort of have these ideas, and like they even might just be completely wrong, but like they people then think that, oh, this guy has some authority because like he got his business to 100 million, or did the X thing that you think is cool. But that may not be something that they did, and even if they did, that may not work for you. And it could be helpful in the short term, and in giving you like some motivation to do that. But like, even if you go ahead and do that, it may not be the reason that you succeed. So I guess just just questioning in general, and criticizing these things could help as well.
But it has to be fun, because if it's not fun, you're not going to want to do it. And if you're just going through the rote mechanics as someone told you to, you're probably not going to be successful, because you're going to burn out, and then nothing is going to get done. So I think following the fun is very good advice, and I think it's not given enough. Okay, if people enjoyed this conversation and they want to know more about you, where would you send them next?
They could follow me on Twitter, just my name, Arjun Khemani, or they could go to my website in Substack, arjunkhemani.com.
This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
It's been amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. We will talk more soon, hopefully when you're stateside.
Yes.
Amazing. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you so much for being here. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please leave a 5-star rating. Ratings are how this show gets discovered by other people, and it helps me bring in better guests. And no matter where you're listening, please like and subscribe to the show to make sure you don't miss a future episode. That's all for this week. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next week.